could see pictures of our baseball field now, it'd make you sick.
Yeah, I don't even think I want to see it, to be honest with you. I know when I went back to Peerless, it was just, you know, the old gym, like I came up playing in the old gym and that got torn down. And then, Steve, the new gym got sold. I think when I was there, it had farm equipment in it, right? And you could kind of see it, and I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
I just don't need to see this shit, you know. When your memories are what they are, you just don't want to see that, you know.
My son-in-law came up here for the first time, and he saw our baseball facility, and he was absolutely flabbergasted.
Mm-hmm.
He just couldn't imagine that this little town had a baseball facility like we had here. He was just totally in awe of it.
Mm-hmm.
He played for the Billings Royals, and then went to Wichita State, and then he made it into AAA with the Giants,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up marrying my daughter and quitting baseball.
Oh wow, Triple A. That's amazing how the connection of the sport, you know, with your daughter and him. That's funny. I know my cousin. Well, Dick's daughter Angie married Ken Meyer. You probably know that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you know, baseball, and she loves baseball. Of course, you know Dick. What a ball player he was. But yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So when was that your son-in-law saw the ball field, Dan?
Well, I was trying to think when they got married about 18 years ago, so I suppose that's the first time he was up here,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, of course, baseball was still going then, and everything was good. Now the weeds are growed up in there, and it's just typical, you know, it's just, it's really sad, but it's the way life is, and you can't, and a lot of it has to do with numbers.
Yep.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, you know, part of the reason for this book, you know, when I wrote the basketball book, it's going to be nostalgic. It's going to be kind of looking back at a time where, you know, there weren't any weeds growing on the field, let's just say, right? And it kind of, it's a good opportunity to write about it because, you know, if things were still humming, you know, like if the Blues were still winning state championships, the story back then, it wouldn't really, I mean, it would be important, but it wouldn't be as, you know, wow, that Scobey really won 8 state championships in baseball, right? And what was that story about? Because, you know, they don't even have teams now. There must have been a time, right? And, you know, with the Peerless book, it was, you know, when the high school closed in 2009, I think it was. Yeah. That was when I wrote the book, because it was partly to just kind of keep the memory alive, right, of what it was like when we played there and the school and everything. And that's what one of the themes of this book will be, is it's going to be incredibly nostalgic, right? Looking back at those times and how it was with Doc, but, you know, a little bit before Doc and after Doc as well, right? When there were some good teams that came after Doc that came really close to, well, you know, your son played on one of them in 96, 97, that time frame, 95. But yeah.
They were, you know, they were good, and there was some, I go back to about 65, 66 in there, and, you know, there were some good teams even then.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's something to be said about the first one. It you know, it kind of opens up the floodgates. It shows everybody that, hey, it can be done. You know, it was no different with the 79 kids winning the state basketball tournament. It showed them that, shit, they could do it. And then from there in Scobey, you know, it went to the 96, 97 bunch, and they won back-to-back football championships, and were undefeated that opened up the floodgates for football. That's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, it is. I know. In Peerless's case with basketball, up until Donnie Puckett's senior year, which was 1974, and 1C was formed in 1950, Peerless hadn't made it to divisional, let alone state, let alone just made it there, right? And I remember that showed us, wow, Peerless can make it to divisional, right? Get out of our district. And then, in 78, then we made it to state, and then there were teams that came after us that made it to state too, right? In 82 and 88 and 95. So absolutely, Dan, it is. I think it's kind of, I don't know, maybe a little ironic that 1969, the first year Scobey won it, was the first, the year we landed on the moon, right? I'm going to probably kind of weave that into the book a little bit, Maybe Doc said something, well, if we, like he started coaching in 59, I believe in 10 years we can win a state championship, right? Something like that. But yeah, absolutely. That first year it shows it can be done. And, Dan, I don't know if you read Dan Danielson's letter. He talked about that, right? About those players that did win and, won the state and showed the way, right? That we could do it too. Absolutely. There's so much to that. So let's, if we can, just a little bit of a formal part to this. I just got a couple questions I want to ask, and then we'll just move into kind of a free flow on you just start talking about Doc and playing ball and funny stories and all that. But when did you start playing baseball, and do you remember who your first coach was and who your mentors were early on?
Yeah, I started in Little League and then progressed up. But back then, I would have been like 14 when I went to the first tournament with Doc and the team down to I can't remember if it was a
Glendive
tournament or the divisional tournament in Glendive.
That would have been state in 1968.
I hung out with Wang, and Wang was older than I was, and he was, accepted in there, and he played. But I remember going into Philadelphia's room in the motel, and I believe it was him and Danny Smith and Paris French and probably Bill Gale. And I was with Wang, and we walked in, and they had a 6-pack of beer and a pack of cigarettes there. And one of them looked at me and said, "And you keep your mouth shut, you little bastard." Scared the hell out of me, I'll tell you. I was just standing there, eyes as big as they come, But that's kind of the way it was.
Now, that might have been. So you're older than Terry by a couple years, right? Terry Puckett.
Yep, Terry graduated in 73, and I graduated in 71.
Right. So I'm thinking you might be talking about Glendive as the Eastern Divisional Tournament in 1966, which was Phil Audette's last year. And do you remember, so Dan Smith that year was declared ineligible to play after the tournament. I don't know if you have that memory.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Right, I remember that.
That would be that tournament then, because that was Phil's last year in 66, and that was in Glendive. The state was actually at Cobb Field. Yeah. So
that was probably it.
That would have been your first year then. 1966.
Yeah, and I don't remember if I played it. I don't think I even played. I guess I just was with the team. and don't remember just I was so young. But that's the way Doc did it. He saw something in you, and then he would say, I want you to come, with the team, So,
yeah.
But Phil was one hell of a baseball player.
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't remember watching him play. I mean, I did with the Plainsmen, but not when he was in Legion. I was too young.
Right. Yeah, and I watched those guys, and they were, Phil heads and tails, I think, the best on yet. They were all good, but Phil was a step above them, But, and then, of course, I was blessed to play with Dick and John and those guys, and those guys were studs. Dick was as good as they come. He was just what they call a clutch player, and that was it. He was as good as they come.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember his home run in the state tournament? Like, of course you do. You were playing in '69 against Haver. What's your memory of that when it tied the game it was the second to last game?
Yeah, it was amazing. I don't know if you know this or not, but we won the coin flip, and Doc gave up the last at bat to take our home lucky dugout. Did you know that?
I did. It was actually in the Leader article, and I'm like, I read it, and then I reread it, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And then Jack Higgins mentioned it too after that, because I talked to him on Facebook. I'm like, did this really happen? And he said, yeah. And he told me that Doc asked the players, right, about what you wanted to do if he won the flip, right? The players decided that?
Yeah, I think so. I think Doc just said, what do you guys want to do? You want to hit last? And I think he wanted the dugout along with the guys, and that's the way it went. And if I'm thinking right, I believe that they had the last at bat, and there was a ball hit to left field, and it went, I think, close to the wall, if not out there. And I don't remember if there was a guy on first or if he was on second. I can't even remember. I was catching, and I believe it would have been the winning run. And Randy Legary picked the ball up in left field, and I had dropped one earlier in the year, and I was just shitting my pants that I was going to drop the ball if it was close. And of course, Randy Legary picked that thing up, and he hit that goddamn thing, and I kept thinking to myself, I hope it's so far over my head that I can't fuck this up. And I jumped up in the air, caught the ball. Whoever it was came sliding under me, and down I went. And I don't really know if the guy was safe or out. I came down right on top of him, and the ball was in my glove. And they called him out, and we win the game and go on to the next. I think that was the first championship game, if I'm thinking right.
Yeah.
But
I actually have, so before you just told me that story, the one memory I have of you, Dan, playing is jumping like as high as I've ever seen anybody jump at the home plate to catch a ball and put a tag down and got somebody out. I was actually in the dugout. And I remember it. That's the one memory I have of you, and it must have been that play.
Yeah, it was all a blur kind of, but that, I remember thinking in my mind that, geez, I hope it's not my fault, and it goes so far over my head, but it wasn't. And like I say, I have no idea to this day if the guy was slid under the tag or if he was safe or out or and then Dick hit that. I think it was in the next game when Dick hit the home run to win it, or the tie one. I can't even remember all the.
Yeah. So yeah, I always thought, and I have access to this archive, right? And all the newspapers and the leader and everything. So I always thought Dick's home run was in the bottom half of the inning, and that it was a walk-off, and that it won the state championship. But all three of those things aren't true. It was in the top of the ninth, in the game you needed to win to just stay alive, right? It wasn't the state championship game. It was to just play to get an extra game, right? And it didn't win the game. It tied it. And I think what you might be talking about is in the bottom half of that inning might have been where Haver came close to walking it off with that hit that Legary would have thrown home. That isn't in the leader, but that must have been the situation where that happened. And that kept you alive to get to the top of the 10th. And then I think you got a run in the top of the 10th and then held Haver in the bottom half, I think on a ground out maybe. Or maybe that was it. I don't know. But yeah, I always thought Dick's home run was...
Right.
It
was either going to be the winning run for Haver or the tying run, if I'm thinking right. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if that was the bottom of the 8th or bottom of the 9th. It's just too long ago, Joe, for me to remember that.
Yeah, no, I know. I've, the archives have my memory. Like, I've had memories of things. The way it works is, like, at a certain point in time, I think it was a certain way, right? And that's how I remember it. And then that becomes reality. And then I started reading these newspaper articles and I'm like, whoa, that's not how it actually happened. And it's kind of been, like, really? I swear to God, that's what happened, But it turns out it wasn't.
Well, I can tell you something, though, too, that the articles aren't always right.
That's true, too.
Years ago, I read that article that guy wrote about Dave Fanning pitching against us in '71, and that he pitched a no-hitter.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I knew it wasn't true. I wrote a letter to the guy. I think he was from the Great Falls Tribune, if I'm thinking right.
Yeah.
And he wrote that article, and I wrote him a letter, and also sent him a clipping of a copy of the clipping of the box score.
Yep.
And I said, you got your information wrong because it wasn't a no-hitter. I said, I know because I played in the game, and he never contacted me back or nothing. But
yeah, I actually.
Sometimes the articles aren't.
Yeah, I know, and it was Don Higgins that got a bunt single, and it was a bunt single that broke it up. Yeah, it was a one-hitter, but it wasn't a no-hitter. Yeah, but
right.
You're right. They're not always accurate. That's absolutely true. So what?
That was quite a game.
Oh, I watched every pitch of that game. It's one of the. I mean, I remember it so well. I watched Terry and Dave warm up in between innings. I didn't even leave. I didn't even go get one of those burgers, right, during the game. I mean, you talk about a game that moved fast. I mean, Fanning worked fast, right? But I mean, but there were no errors in that game. Not only was the pitching great, but the fielding was great. It was, and Haver won it on, Fanning got a single. Somebody sacrificed him to second. They laid down a sacrifice bunt. And then somebody hit a single between third and short to drive him home. And that was the only run, and I think it was in the 7th inning. And I'll never forget that game. It was, you wouldn't find a better baseball game played anywhere. I don't think it took 90 minutes to play, and both the pitchers and the fielding, and it turned out that Don, I think it was Don, it might have, that bunted. When he got on first, Fanning picked him off, and he said he was.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he said he was stealing, and he picked him off, and Don said that throw to second, he thought he was safe, that he got underneath the tag, but one of the things, I'm going to write a lot about that game in the book, was that, ultimately that's really baseball, because what it came down to is, when a team got a base runner, you needed to get him to second base, and Haver was able to do that, and Scobey wasn't. And that might have been the difference in the game. If Don could have got on second and somebody could have got a hit through, who knows what could have happened. But I remember watching that game. I was on the backstop to the right, just underneath the where the announcers were for radio, and I watched the whole game. What memories do you have of that game, Dan?
Well, it's the two best pitchers I ever saw or faced.
Mm-hmm.
Those two were incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a lot of pitching after Legion, when we were barnstorming up in Canada. And those two were the best without question. And, Danny Dale was a good pitcher, but I remember facing Danny Dale. Doc would never want to lose to the Plainsmen.
Mm-hmm.
And he pitched Terry against us, and then when you guys were playing, he pitched Danny Dale against us. And Danny was good, but he wasn't Terry Puckett or Dave Fanning.
Right.
Those guys were I ever saw.
Terry told me a story about the Plainsmen. And this would have been 1972 or 3. So Terry was pitching. And it's funny you mentioned Doc always wanted to beat the Plainsmen. So Terry said that Jack Higgins was, he was on the Plainsmen. Terry was pitching. And he said that Jack Higgins was talking trash or something. And Terry said, the next time that son of a bitch comes up, you hit him right in the chest. So Doc ordered Terry to hit Jack Higgins with a pitch.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, really? That's how, that was one of his former players, But I guess that's just how competitive Doc was. But he just said that the Plainsmen were just really cocky, is what Terry told me, that was Doc's perception anyway. And and I said, well, are you cocky? Were you cocky, Jack? And he said, what, you mean a really good athlete that that won a lot? Was, yeah. So he was saying, yeah, he was. So yeah, it would have been Terry hit him, and Doc ordered him to hit him. But when I was talking to Jack before I told him that, he said, did Doc ever order his pitchers to hit us? Because we were talking about that in the dugout once, that maybe he was. And then when I told him that story about Terry, he's like, yeah, I guess he was. Yeah, and it was...
Yeah, there's no doubt. Jack Higgins, in my mind, at least the two best outfielders, but maybe the two best players, all-around players that I watched played baseball, it came down to my thoughts were Randy Stolen and Jack Higgins.
Wow.
They were the cream of the crop for me when I watched them play. And of course, I played with Jack, or John, whatever you want to call him. But,
yeah.
Dick was one fine athlete, and he was a baseball player, pure and simple. But Dick didn't have speed,
All around, yeah, you're talking around.
Jack had speed,
And he could hit for power too, right?
They both hit for power. They both hit for average. They both ran the outfield like nothing. It was just effortless. And they had speed, power, good arms. That was my personal opinions. But them two, boy, they stuck out in my mind as far as players.
Yeah, Randy definitely was the best all-around player I ever played with, for all those reasons you just mentioned. He had a cannon for an arm. He was fast. He covered so much ground in the outfield. He hit for power, average, and he could run. Yeah, all around, absolutely the best I ever played with. Yeah, and I was reading Jack Higgins, I think, is the only blue to hit for the cycle, at least in a state tournament. And that was in 1968. He hit for the cycle in the first game, I think, against Havre. He had a home run, and I think he was 5 for 5. He had an extra hit in there too. He had a home run, a triple, a double, and I think 2 singles, which is just amazing when I read that. And that's actually in an article that I read. So, yeah, I remember him playing center field. But I don't remember. I was only 8 years old, but I do remember some things about that tournament, especially you catching that ball, which is amazing. That's the one memory that I have of you, and that was so critical. I knew it was an important play, but I didn't realize that it was in the state tournament.
Well, you know that picture you sent of me sliding in?
Yeah.
Do you remember who, or do you know who that home plate umpire was?
No, I don't recognize him.
Well, his name was Ron Ewing.
Yeah, Ewing.
Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah. He must have still been umpiring when you guys were playing Legion, probably.
He was.
Yeah. Well, a kind of a funny story was, it must have been in about, well, I can't remember if it was 1970, maybe 71. Anyway, Terry was pitching, and his arm was hurting. And so we were in the dugout. Doc always had his black bag in there. And he said, roll up your sleeve. So Terry rolled his sleeve up, and Doc got his bag out and got his needle and syringe out, and put some whatever in there. And he's standing there giving Terry a shot in his arm. And Ron Ewing was up and behind the plate, and he'd walked over to the dugout, and he's standing up there looking, and Doc's giving him a shot. And Doc looked up and said, oh, geez, Ron, the kid's got a bad cold.
Yeah, Terry told me that.
Did he tell you?
Yes.
Did he tell you that?
God,
God,
that's classic. That is unbelievable. That's so Doc, like right away he just comes up with that. Oh my God. Yeah, that has to be, I'm gonna talk to Kelly about that just to make sure, but we got to tell that story. I mean, because that was part of it, right? That was who Doc was. That's how it was. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to go, oh my God, now all of those wonderful things that, like we're going to cancel Doc now, right? Because of that story. Yeah.
Well, he did that to me in 71, I believe it was. and my back went out before the state tournament there, and he took me up to the office, got me on the table, and he got this needle out, and I was looking over there, and he said, "You just don't be looking here." And he's got this goddamn 6-inch needle, and he said, "Now, goddamn it, this is really serious business here. Now, goddamn it, you don't move." And he got up on the table and put his knee in between my shoulders, and he said, "Now, goddamn it, don't move." And he started sticking that needle in, and I flinched, and he said, "God damn you, I told you not to move, and don't move anymore." And I said, "Well, it hurts." He says, "Oh, fuck up." And so anyway, he gave me a shot in my back, and I went on to play. So that's typical Doc. That's the way it was.
What was it? Was it cortisone? Was it a steroid? Do you think he was shooting you with?
Shit, I don't know. I was 18 or 17 years old. He didn't ask. He just figured that, Doc knew what he was doing. God damn it.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible that you and Terry both have those memories of him shooting him in the arm with Ron Ewing. He told me the exact same story. He told me it was, he thought it was in 73 at the state A tournament when Ewing...
Well, I was still playing, so it must have been 71. I don't...
Yeah.
Maybe it happened more than once,
Yeah.
Probably did.
It probably did. Yes, it did. Funny story about that is I shared that story about Terry getting shot up in the dugout with Dan and Danielson. And when we were in 79, when we were playing the Helena Senators in the playoff game to get into State A, it was in the top of the 5th inning, and Dan was pitching. He was pitching a good game, and he threw a pitch, and I heard at shortstop, I heard his arm kind of snap, his elbow, like I heard it snap, and he just was, immediately just grabbed his arm, and I think Doc did come out to talk to him, but he ended up finishing the inning. The last out, he got the last out, so he got the win because we were ahead at the time. Not that that matters, but he did. And when he got in the dugout, Doc was sitting there, and he had his black bag, and he had a needle pointed straight up, and he was shooting it, and Danny ran away from him. No needles, Doc, no goddamn needles. And when I told the story about Terry to Dan, he said the reason he ran was because of that story you just told me about Terry. That he was a bat boy, and he remembered it, right? And there's no goddamn needles, Doc. And I remember them doing that in the dugout. Like he was holding his elbow, and he ran away from Doc, and Doc had the needle, and he never shot him up.
Yeah, there's another story I could tell you real quick about 1970. We're playing in the state championship in Havre. It's hot, like 90 degrees in the shade, and only like it can get in Havre, up on that hill. And we weren't supposed to do anything in 70. We lost those 5 studs from the 69 team. And here we are playing in the championship game. We lost, of course, but anyway, and I don't remember which game it was. I was catching, and trying to think who was pitching. I can't even remember that. Anyway, Wine was playing shortstop, and the pitcher is winding up, and as he's winding up to pitch, Wine just turns and runs right off the field and out the gate. And the pitcher threw the pitch, and it was a ball or something, and I called timeout, and the ump called time, and I'm watching Wang, and he's ran up over to where the cars are. Well, what had happened is he thought it was his dad. Somebody was laying on the ground there, and he thought it was his dad had a heart attack.
Oh.
Another one, because he had a heart. And anyways, he didn't do anything. He just took off and ran right out the gate up to where it was. Well, it turned out, I think it was Ray Lapierre, and those guys would sit up there and drink, you know. And it was hotter than hell, and I think he just blacked out and fell onto the ground there. And it was, you know, it was old Ben Danielson and Johnny Wang and all those guys, you know, and they would sit and drink their whiskey and shit, you know. But anyway, that was a funny story. He ran right in the middle of the
Was it Ray Lapierre's name? Ray?
I think it was Ray Lapierre that was laying there. I could tell you another quick story you've probably never heard before, and now this came from Cliff Eggfeld. And it's not really a baseball story, but it was kind of a cool story, I thought. There was the Harlem Globetrotters were playing in Billings at the Metra. Mm-hmm. Don't remember what year it was, don't remember any of that. There was somebody from Peerless that lived down there that helped out at the Metra, and he was at the back door, just to kind of be by the back door, I guess. I don't know if he let teams in that way or let somebody in.
Right.
Anyway, this guy is sitting there, whoever he was, I can't remember, and out walks, if my memory serves right, it was either Meadowlark Lemon or Marcus Haynes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, he gets talking to this guy, and they're just casual conversation, and he said, well, where are you from? And he goes, oh, I'm from some little town up in northeast Montana called Peerless.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy stops and looks at him and said, you know, I played against one of the best basketball players I've ever played against in Peerless, Montana.
Wow.
And he said, I don't remember his name, but he said he had a hunchback.
Wow.
Well, you know who that
Uncle Reese. Uncle Reese.
Yeah, it was Uncle. Yeah.
Wow.
So I thought that was kind of a cool story.
Oh, that's beyond cool. Oh my God.
Yeah, I wish I could remember all those stories from sitting with your dad and Cliff and Joe Anderson and Ron Scott. I can't remember them all anymore, but there were a lot of them.
I really regret not contacting Cliff, you know, who was just, I mean, does anyone have more stories than Cliff, right? I mean, so I got to tell you this story, Danny. Maybe you've heard it. Flaxville fielded Legion teams through 1967, right? There were some years where if they didn't field a team, you know, a couple of their players would come to Scobey and play. Like, I think that happened in 1963, maybe. But for the most part, they always fielded a team, and they were good. Anyway, he said Doc was like, you know, the year before in 1958, Flaxville won the district, right? And so Doc gets there in 59. He's like, all these Flaxville players, 4 or 5 of them were really good, right? And he's like, why are you, you know, fielding a team and what come to, you know, and Cliff told him that Doc was talking and said, you know, I think maybe your ball players and your kids in Flaxville ought to start going to Plentywood to see the doctor. Because if you're not going to come to Scobey to play baseball, maybe that's where you should go to see your doctor, right? It's kind of threatening him. What? Yeah.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
In 1969, Flaxville had a 8-man football team, and they came over and played Scobey in football at the baseball field. That's where the football field was then. And they kicked the shit out of Scobey.
Wow.
So, and that's, Randy Legary and Jack Higgins, those guys were playing then.
Mm-hmm.
And for Flaxville. So, yeah.
So Terry told me this other story. Actually, it's funny. So most of the stories he told me, Dan, you were in them, especially the funny, especially the funny ones. And all Terry ever said it was always Wolfe. It was always Wolfe. But he told me the story of Gene Thompson, which I want to talk a little bit about him, but just let me tell this story. Was, you know, back then there wasn't the Scobey Legion bus, right? You guys had to drive to games yourselves. And he said sometimes on the road you would get the cars side by side and roll the windows down and then start throwing Vienna sausages, Terry said, like kind of in a fight or a war, like you'd throw Vienna sausages from one car to the other and kind of get in a Vienna sausage fight, he told me. And then he told me another story about Gene Thompson one time reaching over with a cigarette to pass it to the car next to it, and he said it was Wolfe that was getting the cigarette. Do you remember that?
Well, yeah, I guess there's a lot of that stuff you don't want to remember, you know. I can tell you another story.
Okay.
Back in the 69 and 70 in there, you know, this what they call mooning was just kind of coming around, you know, where you stick your ass out the window when you went by somebody. Well, anyway, when my dad died, Greg Adet and Jerry Lapierre and Dan Wang, and I can't remember who else was in the car. They were coming back from Billings for my dad's funeral, and they got behind some woman or something there. And anyway, the bottom line is they were mad because she was going slow or something. They couldn't pass. Anyway, the bottom line is they flipped her a double moon out the windows when they went by. Well, they took the license plate number down and they contacted the sheriff's department here, and then they contacted the county attorney. Well, when those guys got to town, they got, I don't know if you'd call it arrested or called in, and there they were up in front of the county attorney, and who was Mike Trainer at the time. And I don't know if somebody called Doc or if Doc got wind of it. Anyway, he called down there and said, "What the hell, Mike? What's going on? You got my boys down there." And so Mike said, "Well, apparently they took their pants down and stuck their asses out the window, and they call it mooning." And then Doc said, "Jesus Christ, Mike, you're not going to arrest my boys for something like that. Based on just kids." And anyway, they got a scolding from the county attorney, and then they let them go. And anyway, Doc said, "You're not going to get my boys for that," he said. Mike Trainer was the county attorney, and of course, him and Doc played cards. You know, they played bridge and they played poker and all that stuff. You know, and I don't remember if maybe Craig or Wang or somebody called Doc, or if Doc got wind of it, or whatever happened. I don't remember. Bottom line was they got Doc said, "You know, that's my boys." You know. So
yeah, I wanted this other story that Terry told me about you, Danny. I just wanted to make sure. So he said you guys were playing a game in Williston, and that you were pitching, and I don't know what year it was, but he said Wolfe was just horrible. He was just doing horrible, and so Doc was pissed, and he put me in, and then you moved to catcher. And he said that the umpire was the third base ump was moving in towards the middle of the field and was stealing the signs that you were flashing to Terry, and you found out about it and let Doc know, and Doc came absolutely unglued. And I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I guess bits and pieces of it, and I kind of remember rolling the ball.
Yeah, he told me that. You did that. You did that. You rolled the ball back to Terry. Why did you do that?
Well, good question, right? Probably being a spoiled brat, back in those days, but who the hell knows? Jeez.
That's what Terry might have thought.
Don't know that.
That's what Terry might have thought, is because you were pissed because you got pulled out from pitching, maybe?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. Maybe I was doing it to piss the ump off. Who knows? Back to, I was going to tell you about Gene Thompson.
Yeah.
Doc had a tendency to take somebody like Terry, for example, and then just pitch the hell out of him.
Yeah.
And, he probably ruined Terry pretty early with his arm. Anyway, when Gene come, he set up, first time I'd ever heard of it, a pitch count. They kept trying pitches in the dugout, and if I'm thinking right, when you got to 100 pitches, that was it. And I kind of remember when Gene would say, he's got 100 pitches. Doc would say, well, Jesus Christ, you can finish out the game, and then the two would argue about it, And I kind of remember that deal, and that's the first time I ever saw anybody do a pitch count. He did. I remember I probably was the first time I ever really faced him. I caught him for all those years, and I thought, well, shit, I should be able to hit him. I caught him for all those years. Well, he struck me out 3 times. And I remember thinking to myself, he's as good as I thought he was.
Wow.
And maybe better. And both him and Fanning had a ball that dropped. And I used to call him a heavy ball. And it was a heavy ball, and they kept him low. Really hard to hit. And, you got an umpire that was giving you anywhere towards that low strike zone. They were tough, boy. Really tough. He was 14 when he pitched against the Royals down there.
Yep.
People forget that's when, there was only one team in Billings, that was the Royals.
You played the Electrics in a playoff game in '69 to play into the state, like a day after the state tournament in Scobey, which was horrible. Your pitchers are done, Doc got that corrected when we played later.
We got beat bad, I remember that. And then I remember that we all got drunk afterwards.
Yeah, to probably celebrate, you didn't even have time to celebrate the championship in Scobey. You had to get on a bus and go to Great Falls. Yeah.
No, we didn't have time to do shit.
And all your pitchers' arms.
Another thing, we were so goddamn, happy to win the state tournament that, we hadn't even gotten over that by the time we had to take off and go to Great Falls. And we were no more ready to play a ball game than that in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, that's just horrible how they did that back then. We always had a week to play, when we, like our state tournament would get over on a Sunday, our playoff would be the following Saturday. We'd have 5 days of rest before we had to play that next game. Our pitchers, arms we could be fresh, and as opposed to the day after. That was something that they finally got that corrected. I bet you Doc had a lot to do with that too. Gene Thompson, yeah. So it sounded like he was a really good presence on your team in '69.
Yeah, he was.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what most of us felt like, especially with the pitching.
Yeah.
That's where he really shined with the pitching, and he seemed to get along real good with us. I don't know. I think he was a superintendent then at Peerless.
Yeah, he was. He was. And he was very gruff, and I have some memories of him. I was in 1969, like I was a second grader, right? And he was the superintendent, and in Peerless, superintendent is K through 12. You're the superintendent. So Gene Thompson started this new policy. If you were going to go home sick while you were at school, you had to go see him and explain to him, to his face, why you needed to go home, right? So, it was like, I went to school, it was like 30 below, I got a bug, I had, a head cold, I felt like shit, right? And then, so I walked up to my teacher and said, hey man, I can't, I got to go home, I'm sick. And I was just getting sicker, right? And she's like, okay, well, we have to go see Superintendent Thompson. I'm like, oh, Jesus. So I literally go into his office, and he's sitting there behind the desk with his secretary, and he says, so I hear you want to go home, Joe. What's wrong? What's the problem? And I was just like totally intimidated, and I'm like, well, my nose is frozen, my toes are cold. Your nose is frozen, your toes are cold. He started laughing, and then his secretary started laughing, and I'm like, what the fuck do I have to do to go home? I was like embarrassed, I was sick, I was scared, and so tell me what's really wrong with you, Joe, right? And I'm like, well, God, I'm sick, I was able to get home, but I never will forget that as a second grader. I was just scared to death of him. And then, he coached basketball out there. And of course, as a, 7 and 8-year-old, 9-year-old, I didn't know he was an alcoholic. I didn't know that he would come drunk to games. I found that out a lot later. Like at Westby, he was drunk at the game, and they had to escort him off the court, right? Because he was intoxicated. But anyway, there was a game at Peerless, and Peerless had maybe 7 or 8 guys on the team, and they fouled out, right? 3 or 4 of them fouled out, and there was one call, and Thompson came out off the ball was bouncing in the middle, the old gym in Peerless, which had a very short ceiling, and the ball was bouncing in the middle of the court after the call, and Thompson walked out and cocked his leg and timed it when that ball came down, and just rocketed the ball off the ceiling with just his foot like a soccer ball. And I think he hit it so hard that the ball went off the ceiling, bounced off the floor, and I think it might have went up and hit the ceiling again in the gym, was how hard he hit that ball. And the entire gym, like, one of those movies where everything just gets frozen and it's completely still and quiet. That's what it was. And then the ball was just gradually starting to bounce slower and slower till it came to a rest. I will never forget that. Of course, he got ejected from the game, right? But, that was Gene Thompson. But he was also, Dad would take us up to the gym every night in the winter to play ball. And we had to go to his house, which is right next door to the old gym, to get the key. And he was always real friendly. Here you go, Tiny. Yeah, bring it back when you're done. And he always let us in there, But I do have a lot of memories of him. But I didn't know what in a bad place he was, at that time. But yeah, I have some memories of Gene Thompson, boy.
Yeah, I knew him pretty well, and he married a gal from Plentywood, Grace Thompson, and
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of gave up drinking, and if he didn't give it up completely there, he, got far and few between when he would, because I think she pretty much put her foot down, and I think that's kind of when he kind of went on the wagon there.
Mm-hmm.
I know after we got back from Great Falls, we had a team kegger to celebrate our state championship, and then we had a get together after that, and I had saved the keg and had everybody sign it, so I had Doc and Gene both sign the keg. I kept that keg for a long time, and I think it was out at the golf course. I think they threw it away.
Oh no, that would be a collector's item. That was after '69 championship.
Yeah, everybody signed it, and Doc and Gene both signed it. E. Thompson, it said.
Yeah, E. Thompson. Yeah.
And I finally took it out to the golf course one time to show the Higgins boys when they were back. And I guess I left it out there, and I think they threw it away, I'm guessing.
Oh, man, that's a shame. I mean, that's better than a signed baseball, a signed keg. And it'd be everyone on the team and the two coaches.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Dick and Craig probably pitched the majority. You see, that's the only time I got to start and play was when Craig was pitching or Dick was pitching or maybe Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember how they did that now. But Dick would play short, and then Craig would go to short, and Craig was a catcher also. So,
although,
if they were
did you notice though that last picture I sent you at State that you had the gear on when Dick's getting the trophy? You had the catcher's gear on. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I got to play there. I got to play there because whenever Dick pitched or Craig pitched for sure, I played.
Yeah, Dick was pitching. Dick pitched the championship game, so you would have been catching and Craig would have played short. Oh, Terry told me a story about Craig Adet playing shortstop. He said you were in Libby on that road tour across the state you went to in '69, and he said, so Dick must have been pitching. And Terry said Craig Adet was playing shortstop for some reason, but what you just told me, he played short when Dick pitched. So he said that a ball got hit to short and Craig threw it over the fence to first base, over the road and over like the trees, and he said he thought it landed in a pool across a road on the other side of the street. Do you remember that?
It did. It did. Everybody just stood there. It was the damnedest thing. It just literally got away on him, and of course he had a hell of an arm on him.
Yeah.
And it went over the first baseman's head, over the baseball fence, over the road, and whatever trees were there, and over the fence and into the swimming pool. Amazing.
God.
He hit a home run, one of the longest I've seen in Cobb Field.
Yeah.
And it was pretty much left center, and it went over the fence, over. I think it bounced on the other side of the pavement on the street, so there would have been a sidewalk and shit behind there and the boulevard. It was well hit.
Yeah, I read about that.
He hit it dandy.
Mm-hmm. Broke up a shutout.
That might even been. Yeah, it might even been in there.
Yeah, it was. It was in there. Broke up a shutout from Jerry Schuster, who was pitching a left-hander, I guess, from Billings. A pretty good pitcher. In the ninth inning, it broke up his shutout. Yeah. And it wrote about it.
Yeah. 4-1.
Yep, that's exactly right. That was the game Terry pitched when he was 14.
Yeah, You know, people forget that's when, you know, there was only one team in Billings. That was the Royals. You know, there wasn't, in '79, was there two teams there? Do you guys play down there? I don't even remember.
Yeah, the Scarlets started, well, I think they started as a B team in '66, maybe '65. And then in 1974, they won the state B tournament. In fact, they played in Scobey in the Eastern Divisional. That's where Streaked. I don't know if you remember that. That Eastern B tournament was a streaker in left field. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I guess I do kind of remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I remember that.
The Scarlets. Yeah, the Scarlets were there, and they won it, and then they won the state. And the next year in '75, they moved up to A as an A team, counter to the Royals. And then in '76, their second year in A, they won the state A tournament, and we beat them in '79 at Cobb Field, and then they eliminated us from the state A tournament later on. The Scarlets, yeah. Oh, this is like treasure, Dan. I mean, your stories are just awesome. That plus corroborating stories that Terry told me, and that you're okay with me writing about you rolling the ball back to the mound. We'll just leave it open as to why you were doing that.
I'm sure there was a reason.
We'll let the reader make up their own mind. Terry said it was because you were pouting, just to let you know.
Well, I'm sure it was probably, and who knows why.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Maybe it was because I got my ass pulled out of it. Who knows? I remember another story that I was catching, and I can't remember if it was Terry that was throwing, and he was a little off, and I you know how the catcher moves the glove back to the middle, you know, and of course Doc would, Ron Ewing was up, and I was moving the glove, and Doc was yelling from the dugout, "Where was that at, Wolf?" And I go, shrug my shoulders, right down the middle, and pretty soon I get a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and Ron Ewing standing behind me, and he said, "Son, when you get to be able to catch as good as I ump, then you can pull that shit. But until then, you just do your job, or I'll throw your ass right out of this game." I remember thinking to myself, boy, for the next time Doc asked me where the goddamn ball was, I said, "Inside, Doc." He was a very good ump.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he let me know on no uncertain terms that he was a better ump than I was a catcher.
He threw a guy out of the game at the Scobey tournament. I think he was from Browning in '75. Remember? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 1975. Could have been '73. Yeah, he was umping first base. He wasn't even the home plate ump. He threw a guy out for arguing balls and strikes. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, he tossed him right out of the game.
Yeah, and you let me know when this book comes out, because my son-in-law wants one, so I told him I'd get him one.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Shooting for next summer to do that, because I'm still kind of gathering stuff up, and and I know there's an all-class reunion at Scobey in 2025, and I'm thinking that might be a good opportunity for us to maybe get together on a reunion for the Legion team, right? An all year Legion reunion, kind of like we did in '83, Just a thought.
Yeah. And
then all of us could be there and sign each other's books and stuff, because that's one of the things I want to be able to do is, like from the '69 team, get the signatures from all the players and stuff in the book. For me, that's definitely one thing I want to do, just from the books that I have, right? So yeah, oh definitely, Dan, and I'll be keeping everybody up to date on that. So awesome. Hey Dan, you know, I'm sure other stuff might come to you, and we can definitely talk again. But this has been awesome to talk to you. I know we've never sat down before like this, but these stories are just amazing, and it's just thank you, thanks for giving me some of your time today. It's been awesome.